Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we love to hear where you think we got it right and where you think we completely missed the point, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com, or our Rumble channel is great, or any social media. So, Brian, here we are. It's been a couple of wild and woolly weeks since the election of the 47th president. Not too many people have left the country. Haven't seen any mass riots or executions yet. So what's going on?
Well, I'm going to give you my perspective, and then of course I want to hear yours. But to me, it's like eerily quiet. Like it's too quiet. Like it's too calm. Like nothing. There was no shoe that dropped. I'm just waiting for okay, that's what was coming.
Right.
And it hasn't happened yet, and it feels really odd to me. How about you?
No, I agree. I mean, I thought, there was a little bit of protesting in Crazy Town north of us here, north of me, but not a whole lot. So I got to believe that everybody's keeping their powder dry, metaphorically speaking, until hopefully.
Now you're going to be on a list again. See, we just got you off a list, and now you're right back on.
I know. Now I'm back on the line. I'm on the no-fly list again. What do you know? Probably until January is my guess. Although it could very well be, I mean, you've seen the news about various people, Biden welcomed into the White House, and Joe and Mika went down and met with him in Mar-a-Lago from Morning Joe. So it could very well be that his opponents are going to eat themselves.
My hunch on the Joe and Mika thing is that is what they call a business decision.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, of course it is. Because, I mean, he's going to probably take an interview with them in the future, since they came down and said, hey, we don't like you very much, but that's okay.
Yeah, you're a fascist, but, our ratings suck, and we have 50,000 watchers now, and we need to get back over north of 1 million. I did hear an interesting theory on a podcast I was listening to yesterday, the Joe Rogan podcast, and he had a comedian on named Dave Smith, who I really like, very libertarian, right? Also very knowledgeable, has a great memory. Like he can recall data and facts and information on Israel and Gaza and abortion. Like he's really, really good. And he had a theory about why we're not seeing the protesting that I thought was fairly interesting and certainly plausible. And he didn't say this is for sure how it is. He was just saying like, this could be an explanation. But basically he was saying like, we've had all these young people in colleges protesting Israel,
right?
And to have that same group of people who's been protesting the thing going on in Gaza and Israel for a year now, then go protest against the guy who says he wants to stop that war. Like there's some incongruence there,
Interesting.
They would essentially be saying we're for the Biden regime, which has kind of been helping the situation along. I don't know the details of what all he's done. I don't have all that stuff memorized, but from their perspective, like he's the bad guy in that regard. They've been protesting against him essentially.
Sure.
So how could you then go protest against the guy who is taking him out in the elect as far as like who's in charge?
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty insightful. That's a plausible explanation. That
it is
not
plausible.
Not we're like waiting and like ramping up for this,
right?
Which again, who knows what it's going to be, but I thought that was interesting. Also, there's a lot of exuberance and celebration going on.
Oh yeah,
there's a tremendous amount of "I told you so"ism going on.
Oh yeah,
on. And which I honestly I think some of it's warranted in meaning I think that the narrative had been, of course, the majority of people believe in all these far progressive ideas, and of course you're the minority rube if you're not going along with this stuff. And I think there is kind of I think there's an appropriate amount of not so much going as far as that it's bordering into the gleeful exuberance that makes me nervous. So
well, yeah, I mean, I think I don't remember the quote exactly about being gracious in victory or something like that. I mean, but I mean, I totally get it because the progressives have said that everybody that doesn't believe lockstep with what they believe for forever is just like you say, they're a rube and they're a dope and they're just unintelligent, non-college
Unsophisticated,
educated.
unintelligent, yeah, all that
Yeah,
stuff.
they're just and they're they're going to be on the history is not on your side, all that kind of elitist, arrogant garbage. And so, sure, we can take some laps around the track a few times. I think that's okay. It is interesting to see the ones that I think are consistent. Bill Maher,
Yep.
consistent before and after the election. No Trump fan, but he's like,
Nope.
dude, you did it to yourself. You did this to yourself. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then of course there's those who are consistent who are like, well, the fascists and the Nazis won, so there's a certain amount of respect is the wrong word. But I appreciate somebody who's consistent. Now, there's plenty of people like Joe Biden and Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski who's like, finger in the wind. Yeah, this is the way the wind's blowing. We're going with the
Yeah.
wind. And they invited him in, and other people when they've said, well, basically you're inviting a fascist in. Do you want to maybe rethink this? So hypocrisy being a thing that people really don't like.
Yeah.
So I think there is that kind of chasm that's opening up on the progressive side that could very well be very difficult for them
Well,
to navigate.
they've painted themselves into a pretty difficult corner to get
Yeah,
out of, which
yeah,
is there's only two possibilities, and I'm not the first one to say this. This is not some great
sure,
insight I have. But it's not only prevalent, but it's true. And that the only two possibilities are you really didn't mean it when you called him a fascist. You really
right,
didn't mean it when you called him Hitler. It was all rhetoric. It was all propaganda. It was
sure,
all intended to just get the outcome you wanted. And that's why it's okay to go to Mar-a-Lago after he wins the election and
right,
like try to mend that fence, so to speak, and rebuild a relationship because you really didn't think he was that bad of a guy,
right.
or um, you really do think he's Hitler and you're just a coward.
Yeah, well, and I think the truth of the matter is that most people who use that kind of rhetoric, let me put it this way, most of the people who use that rhetoric that were important people didn't believe it. And by important people, I mean politicians and media people,
Influencers and yeah.
influencers. They didn't believe it. The problem is that the people that did believe it were the people that they influenced, and so
Right.
and
Great, yeah,
they're left
and
they're
I'm
left in
sorry.
a
Go ahead.
spot they're left in a spot where they're like, our leaders, are either hypocrites or they lied to us. So, and they're not so stupid. That's a terrible way to say it. Let me back that one up. I don't want to say it that way. They are not so unaware that their leaders have done this that they're going to give them a pass on it. So I
Yeah,
think that does create a big problem.
it is interesting. I was watching a show I watch pretty regularly, Gutfeld. It's a I do
It's
enjoy
funny.
like laughing at this stuff, like because some of the stuff is so frustrating. You have to laugh about it, or
Yeah.
I have to laugh about it, I
Yeah.
should say. One of the regulars on there is a guy named Tyrus, and he made this. He made your kind of your point that you're making. Again, none of these are like you don't have to be super smart to have these insights. Like they're glaringly obvious,
Pretty
right?
obvious.
Um, but the point he was making was along the lines of what you're saying, which is um there were people who legitimately believed that these people were sincere with these things they were saying.
Right.
And now I think the analogy he used was like in the Wile E. Coyote cartoons where like the coyote runs too far off the cliff and then there's like 2 seconds he doesn't realize that there's no ground underneath him and like before he like it's kind of like that for the
Yeah.
audience that was going along.
Yeah.
The influencer stopped on land and the
Right.
and the audience kept going and there's nothing beneath.
Yeah.
They're kind of left out there now and I got to imagine that's frustrating and the audience viewership has dropped like I think 50% for MSNBC or something like
Oh
that. Like
yeah.
I heard a number today, again I have no idea how true these things are, but I heard a number today that the average number of viewers at any given moment on CNN now is 50,000 people,
Oh,
which
man.
is
It's
I
nothing.
mean, you talk about going from when James Earl Jones became the voice of CNN in like 1988 or whatever year that
Right.
was. They were like the machine
Right.
to 50,000 viewers. And Joe Rogan's podcast with Donald Trump had 65 million views within
Right.
24 hours. Like, you know, if media is not dead, it's on life support.
Well, that's true.
Hence the Joe and Mika, like, okay, well, we just lost half our audience because, my opinion is they were not being honest,
Right.
and people are now pissed or feeling abandoned or whatever it is, and now they're just in damage control making business decisions like we still got a mortgage to pay.
Right.
Joe probably lives in a nice house he's got to pay for.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and look at the business. Yeah. I mean, look at the business metrics at CNN and MSNBC. I mean, isn't it? I mean, they're. I think MSNBC is owned by Comcast, and they're essentially up for sale. Somebody.
Yeah.
One of the memes I saw that was funny is Musk should buy them.
That has been floated a number of times for the last 10 or 12 days or so
Yeah.
but I think he believes that it's just a dying medium, and
Yeah.
the online platforms are going to just continue to take over.
Yeah.
um I do have, one of the things you and I have talked about pretty consistently over the last several months or even the year we've been doing this is we're in an era where people are not voting for things, they're voting against things. They're
Right.
voting against ideas and principles and values and priorities and things like that. And there's this kind of shifting that's happening. I'm going to show you a clip here in a couple minutes. I think if you would have told me these two people would be in the same room, let alone doing a live stream 18 months ago, 8 months ago, I would have said no way in hell that's going to happen. But
Right.
here we are. But we're in this era where we're voting against things.
Yeah.
And by modern standards, this was a pretty decisive victory.
Oh yeah.
Over the course of 100 years, probably not, but
Yeah.
in modern standards, we've had very close races for 25 years as far as elections go on the
Yep.
on the federal level and things like that. This was pretty decisive, but so it's an indication that there again, as you and I open this up, like the it's not the minority rubes, like the majority of the population is kind of over this
Right.
wokeism and like the identity politics and carving people up into these little boxes that they have to neatly fit in and things like that.
Right.
So my thought then is, okay, but we're still in this era of speaking against things, not for things. We're still in that era. Now, hopefully we're coming out of it soon. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, of course, but what is the next thing that people will be against? Like, so far they're not really against Trump.
Right.
There's the normal political stuff, like he's made some nominations people are upset about, which
Sure.
for me personally, for Kenny G, the guy 60 years from the future that we're talking to as we record this, like nothing makes me happier than hearing Elizabeth Warren unhappy about some appointment, or pick whatever politician, whether it be Democrat or Republican, the bureaucrats. The more unhappy they are, the more I'm all for it. The more I'm like, we're over the target. If they're pissed, it's probably the right thing
That's
for the
good.
country. That's my perspective.
There you go.
I'm not saying everyone shares that perspective, but just that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
But other than that normal like political rhetoric, like this person's going to be the end of democracy kind of stuff we've kind of gotten accustomed to. What are we going to be railing against now, Dave? What do you think?
Well, I think here's what's got to happen. There has to be a reset of anger, and by a reset of anger, I mean that they believed. I believe that most of the progressive left believed that Trump was not going to win, or that if he did, that Judge Juan Merchan would put him in jail beforehand, and he wouldn't be able to take office, or something like that. I think they just honestly, and so they were just shell shocked when that didn't happen. So I think there's probably, and I think this also explains why, a lot of the riots and protests and stuff haven't really materialized the way that they might have, or the way that we thought they might. And it's because it's going to take a while to really sort of rewrite, here's all the stuff we're angry about in the playbook, and then, get the talking points down, get the memes created, get all this stuff ready to go. And so in fact, I can almost guarantee you that whether or not there's riots, and there's probably going to be some, in January, by February, March, there will definitely be the anger themes that have been fully developed, because he'll be in office. There will be cabinet people in there that a certain percentage population thinks are, there's big Hitler and little Hitler. So it just takes time, I think, Brian, to reset the business plan about what they're upset about to, really do that. And, they'll have to go pull out some more pictures from the Obama era when Obama had kids in cages, and they'll have to reassign those and now say that they're Trump's kids in cages again. So they'll have to rewrite history a little bit to make all of that happen. It just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, looking at historical parallels, I wasn't there, obviously. I mean, you might be able to shed some more light on this because you might have been. I don't know. But back in the 30s, we went through kind of a similar thing. The 1930s, we went through a similar era as a country where prior to World War II, prior to Pearl Harbor, in the late 20s through the late 30s, there was a similar kind of divide of people who thought communism was the way to go and people who thought capitalism was the way to go, and things got really heated. And then FDR became FDR and did big things that, whether or not you agree with those things or not, he did big things that more or less kind of did this kind of reset, a similar version of this reset, if I remember my history correctly.
Sure.
And then boom, Pearl Harbor happens, and we have now a unified enemy. We have a foible, or we have a what's the right word I'm looking for?
Foil.
We have a target for our anger that we can all get behind. So historically speaking, something like that may happen.
Yeah.
It does seem to me, and I'll show you this clip here in a second, but it does seem to me that the perception of where the majority lies has completely been upended. So now people who operated from a posture and a position of, I don't know if dominance is the right word, but certainly the wind was at their back as far as people, thinking that the majority was with them. And it's a little bit different battle plan when you're you're fighting uphill instead of downhill. You know what I mean? Is that making sense?
No, it does.
Like,
yeah,
you
absolutely.
you kind of have to reset your strategy, not just the talking points like you're talking about, but it's a different strategy when you're outnumbered than when you're the majority. And I think that part will have to kind of be figured out. And to illustrate my point here, I'm going to share my screen and show you this video. This is the one that, like I said, if you would have told me this was going to be a thing, that these two people would be in the same room 8 months ago, I would have told you you're crazy. This is Steve Bannon and Nicole. Is it Shanahan? Is that her last name? I think it's Shanahan.
Okay. Interesting.
This is about a minute long clip here. I'll play. And Dave, you tell me if you can't hear it. I think I got the right button clicked here, but to hear it. But this is them on Steve Bannon's podcast. And where's the play button here? Is that it? Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I'm gonna play it now, and the play button's hidden behind some little Zoom icon here. But anyhow, here we go. You tell me if you can't hear.
All
it.
right.
I would talk to Bobby though about eating the Big Macs on President Trump's plane coming back from the UFC. I guess he got so jacked up in the Gladiator Arena he lost himself on the French fries. Where do people go for all your platforms and to follow you on social media, ma'am?
Well, first of all, I'd like to put a plug in for Big Macs. I think we can make Big Macs great again. And I grew up eating McDonald's, and it's really not so much the fact that it is a Big Mac. The Big Mac is a genius invention. It's delicious. But it's the contents of the Big Mac. It's the quality of the meat. It's the dough conditioner in the dough that is linked to all kinds of GI issues. We can make Big Macs great again. And frying French fries in seed oils, it'd be much better if we could fry our French fries in beef tallow or coconut oils. I mean, there's so much we can do and innovate around in terms of healthier food science, especially at scale, and especially with, these branded American nostalgic things like I grew up eating.
I would talk to Bobby though about eating the Big Macs on the.
Let me turn off the sound there. Okay. Is it wild to see those two people not only sharing a space, but being very friendly toward you? I mean,
yeah. That's a whole new world.
Unimaginable 8 months ago, right?
Yeah. And as a side note, I'm down for making Big Macs great again.
I'm right with you, man. I only eat McDonald's maybe like once every 4 or 5 months, probably. I know, to look at me, you wouldn't know that, but I don't really eat that stuff because I don't know what's in the food. I know there's chemicals in there. I don't want to be ingesting things like that. Anyhow, not to make this a health segment, but this reset is real. It's
Yeah.
meaningful. Like,
Yeah.
just describe for Kenny G, like, how would you describe Nicole Shanahan? I think Shanahan, right? Yeah, Shanahan. How would you? I mean, so she was RFK's vice presidential running mate,
Yeah.
but how would you describe her politics to Kenny G?
Well, she's California progressive. She's certainly not a friend of Republicans, and to contrast her, I think the best way to contrast her is to say that Steve Bannon just got out of jail for protecting Trump and for his single-minded loyalty to Trump. So, I mean, you couldn't really, I think, push too far in the opposite direction with two people and sticking them on a podcast together. It's like, so, I don't know. It's really, it's weird. It's just bizarre. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, but the things that, like, the things she's for is like health, that, like, the
Abortion.
numbers for children and these illnesses and
Yeah,
these chronic things that they're dealing with, and everything from diabetes to autism to,
sure.
like, what, the obesity thing, and like pharma making money off that, and big food making money on getting you fat, then pharma makes some money to make you thin, like all these things, like, there's so she's running on something that's kind of hard to, like, it's kind of hard to argue against, right?
Right, right, sure.
um it's and he's all about free speech, and again, she's a California liberal, but
Yeah,
very, California was like the mecca of free speech in 1978.
right, right. Yep. Berkeley
Um
was Berkeley, the free speech movement in Berkeley. That
yeah,
whole movement really started in Berkeley. So no, exactly.
yeah, it's so the things that they're coming together on, though, I think are kind of hard to be anti. They're
Well, sure.
they're now, again, they're going to poke holes in it. Don't get me wrong. There's trans issues and abortion issues. There's these prickly kind of things that I don't think anybody, nobody. There's no coalition who's not at each end of the spectrum, who
Right,
has, some kind of compromised version of, like, what the quote unquote right solution is for abortion or trans. Like, they're very complicated issues and things like
right.
that.
Of course.
And so there's those prickly things in the middle. But these people just being in the same room is sending a message, I think.
Well, it is, and the thing that's going to be interesting to see is like people bringing up now RFK's position on abortion, et cetera. Things that are going to be, well, here's where, or unproven theories of autism or whatever. I think what's interesting to see is that at least so far, the exceptions, are not disproving the rule. In other words, I think what everybody can agree on, I would hope at least, is that our food supply is chemicalized to the point where, even as a relatively, intelligent individual, I can look at the ingredients on foods and say, I have no idea what this is. I got to call up my daughter who's a PhD chemist to even figure out. She doesn't know what it is. So
Yeah.
I think it's bizarre to see, because we've existed on the fringes. Because the fringes have been everything. And
Yeah.
what we've argued about has been the fringes. It's like, no, you can't abort 2.5 seconds after, conception, or you can abort to kids about to get into kindergarten. Maybe we'll abort them now. So that's been where the argument's sort of been. And
Yeah.
what it seems to be now, like with these two in particular, is like, yeah, there's all this stuff out here where I don't agree with you. So, like RFK, no, your position on abortion is absolutely not my position. I think you're nuts over here. But guess what? I'm okay with you being in HAC, in running FDA and running all of these health organizations, because I agree that the problem is much bigger than are these arguments out here. We'll come together, we'll argue about these things, but
Yeah.
these center things. You know what it reminds me of, Brian? You've heard of the intellectual dark web. Have you heard of that? It's so okay.
No.
So here's the intellectual dark web is a place where people like Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris, who are, significantly opposite philosophically, they come together, or Brett Weinstein is part of that, from Evergreen State. Go.
See, you got your plug for Evergreen State.
My guy in there. Yeah, I probably couldn't get there without getting beamed these days. But anyway, it's a place where people that have certain things that they disagree with get together and they have discussions. They have cordial discussions. It's not like, you communist, well, you Nazi, it's not that kind of thing. But they get together and do this. And I think it's one of the things that gets people excited that aren't on the fringes about that kind of conversation between Bannon and Shanahan. It's we can agree on something that makes a difference.
The other thing that strikes me about just seeing the image and what, even with that sound, again, Big Macs is not the thing I was drawn to. Just the imagery of them being in the same room and being cordial and like getting along and things like that.
Right.
It's what stands out to me is they're both pro-America.
Yeah.
They both had the interest of the United States at heart when they say things, when they do things, what they lobby for, what they're passionate about. It's all to make America better. And, again, using the Make America Great Again thing, that's a slogan, but they really do, we're going to disagree on things. This idea of we're going to have this lockstep mindset and approach and everything is that's crazy. We're not aiming for that. We just want America to be better. And whether that's better financially or health-wise or people having more domain over their day-to-day decisions or not being given, narratives that benefit, super, multinational trillion-dollar companies or whatever. We're just tired of that. And I think it's hard to argue against that kind of unity without just saying you're anti-America, which I don't think most people are going to be on board with, especially given the election results. I'll bet you if they had a similar election now, after people like we talked about, the people who had been going down this path of believing these influencers really believe this stuff, and then it turns out they don't. I'll bet you we had a similar election now, Trump would win in a real landslide because people, they've been exposed, right? They've been exposed to just not meaning any stuff.
It sort of seems like, and this is maybe me having wishful thinking, but it sort of seems like tribalism has really been hurt by all this.
Yeah. So because it's these people who have very different opinions on things are both pro-America.
Yeah.
To fight against that, it looks weird. So let me give you an example here. Bobby Kennedy, as you know, Bobby Kennedy Jr. Is all about why don't we have the same kind of products here that they have in the UK or Canada? So an example he was citing was Fruit Loops, right? The cereal Fruit Loops. Right, the Canadian version of Fruit Loops and the American version of Fruit Loops are very different. And so here's the New York Times. So he makes this why don't we have the same version of Fruit Loops they have? That's obviously much healthier. It has way less chemicals in it. And so that's his proclamation. That's his declaration, right?
Right.
So here's the New York Times rebutting him on this. It says, Mr. Kennedy singled out Fruit Loops as an example of a product with too many artificial ingredients, questioning why the Canadian version has fewer than the US version. But he was wrong. And then it goes on to say, the ingredient list is roughly the same, although Canada's has natural colorings made from blueberries and carrots, while the US product contains red dye number 40, yellow number 5, and blue 1, as well as butylated hydroxytoluene, or BHT, a lab-made chemical that is used for freshness, in quotes, according to the ingredient label. So they look absolutely buffoonish.
Yes, they do.
In their contradictory statement, they affirm what he's saying.
Yeah, they prove his point. Well, and there's some folks that are just not, the fringes are not going to give up being the fringes, right? I mean, so I think what happened, so to go back to your Wile E. Coyote analogy of earlier, the folks on the fringe are not smart enough. Again, I don't want to say it that way. They're not.
One time's an accident, Dave. The second time is not an accident.
Okay, I'll just go with it. These idiots. No. So the folks that are on the solidly committed fringe are not going to give up their religion just because they were proven wrong.
Yeah.
So they're not going to do that. But the folks like Bannon and Shanahan and others. So the New York Times is going to remain until they're all fired because the newspaper, loses money hand over fist.
Yeah,
And yeah, I
at some
mean,
point they'll have to make business decisions.
which is like Bezos has done over at the Washington Post.
Yeah.
He made a smart business decision that people, accused him of being a heretic as a result of that. And there you go.
But inside a about a 10-day window. So to explain to Kenny G what this is like, inside about a 10-day window, these people who were the credible ones, and they were the ones with the intellect and the perspective and the more deep knowledge of these things. In 10 days, it went from them being these trusted sources to guide how we should look at things to this where they look like absolute morons for the way that they're trying to describe a thing. And again, you couple that with the Bannon and Shanahan coming together on things like we just want America to be better again.
Right.
Not using their slogan. I'm intentionally not using their slogan
Right.
because I don't want
Right.
to sound like a sloganeer. I'm not. I'm
Right.
just saying the people who are fighting that look increasingly more cartoonish and like stupid and silly.
Yeah, well, and so they're not really getting. I don't think they're getting listened to, which is,
Right.
and I think that's what it's going to take, Brian. I think what it's going to take for folks like on the View and other places to get some level of reality inserted into their world is for people to just stop listening to them, for their
Yeah.
ratings to suffer, for MSNBC to be sold off to to ESPN or something. I
Yeah.
think that's really what it's going to take because they were the cultural leaders until the culture said, no, you're not the cultural leaders, and we're not listening.
But the speed is what's
Oh
remarkable.
yeah,
So,
no,
but not the only thing. It's a part of what's remarkable. Like it's remarkable that Steve Bannon and Nicole Shanahan are on the same thing.
right,
It's remarkable that they're finding kind of what normal was in 2005, where we're
right,
going to disagree in a lot of things, but we all kind of trust that we have the best interest of everyone involved. As they're demonstrating more of that, which I think people probably crave. I don't
sure,
know.
absolutely they do.
Um, so that's remarkable. But the speed in which this shift has happened, like literally, like almost overnight, it was over maybe a 3 to 10 day period
Yeah,
where this just really turned on a dime. That is just fascinating for me to watch how it's just crumbling. The New York Times, I think most people would look at this and say, "You look kind of silly saying that. You're proving his point." But this is them digging their heels in, trying to not lose their religion. I
yeah,
think it's gonna continue that way unless something, again, like you were saying, in March or April, like some new conspiracy or hoax or narrative or something like that will emerge. But now it's an uphill fight. It wasn't an uphill
yeah,
fight. They had the wind at their back, and now they've got to somehow either get their base who's now like perceived as like being the odd ones out,
right.
get them so fired up, or they've got to somehow instill some kind of sense of credibility. I don't know how they do either one, honestly.
No, I don't think the second is possible. I don't think they're going to instill a sense of credibility in the fringe anymore. Now, I think what's going to happen is that the fringe, which is much smaller now, in terms of adherence, is going to cement. In other words, a lot of the people in the New York Times newsroom may or may not be working there in a year because people are just not buying it anymore. But that doesn't mean that their views will change. They won't be business. They won't be smart business people like Joe and Mika. They will just cement even harder into the, well, there you go. Definitely the 75% of America is a Russian agent. It's something like that.
Yeah.
So you'll get that real hardness there, and so I don't think the ground is as fertile for bringing out something like the Russia hoax anymore. I don't think the ground is really there at this point. I mean, it's like that. We've talked about tipping points before. You see things being predictable until boom, in a moment, in a tipping point, 3 to 10 days, things change. And it's not like all of America has become conservative, but
No.
America has said, look, we don't want to be bashing our neighbors over the head anymore. We want to find something we can agree on because that's the way most of us really are. Most of us are, at the end of the day, there's in tribalism, you've got a really solid core, and then you've got this weak stuff on the outskirts. So, you mentioned earlier the students that were protesting. Now, I think you gave them too much credibility or credit for being able to make logical conclusions, because I don't know.
Third time, Dave.
I don't know that they can make those logical conclusions, because they're just, they're following along where the trends are. Well, even William Shatner was amazed on Bill Maher's show that, well, but Kamala's trending. She's a woman and she's black. She's trending. Why didn't she get elected? So I don't think that the public is in a place where they're going to be as easily led necessarily as they were before, especially if there's success in the things that the Trump administration does, which oddly enough, there's already been, they're talking about, well, how do we bring an end to this Ukraine conflict? And Hamas said, yeah, we really need to bring an end to this war. I mean, you start getting some successes, it's really hard to spin that as a conspiracy.
Yeah, it was. I wish I remembered who said this online, because I would definitely give them credit for this. Again, this is not my idea, but they were talking about how as soon as Tulsi Gabbard was nominated, the story comes out like within 12 minutes that she's a Russian asset, right? And so the person posed the question, which I thought was pretty wise, which is, if she's indeed a Russian agent, you guys really believe this, how is she still a lieutenant colonel in the Army National Reserve?
Right.
And play, like, these two things can't be true at the same time.
Right.
Either she's not really a Russian asset, or you guys are okay having a Russian asset in your military.
Right.
It has to be one of the. Again, they continue to paint themselves into these ever more increasingly difficult corners to get out of, with this just absurdity, and every next narrative or hoax they try to think diminishes their credibility even more, so they have less credibility to stand on for the next one. And it feels like it's just kind of like, circling the drain.
Yeah.
Now, that said, it still feels eerily quiet to me, and I'm still kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, and who knows what that's going to be. But it's a fascinating time for sure. Another clip I want to show you, and to evidence that I really do hope people stop buying into these great conspiracies that we've been subjected to. This is a clip I came across a couple weeks ago now. This one just blows me away. This is going back to our WEF folks, I think. Our friends
good.
The WEF
friends.
Yeah. So here's this woman's take on how we handle crime and punishment in the future.
Okay.
Having seen that person commit the crime, even though that person's utterly innocent, that it becomes a planted memory. And so there's some really interesting research that we can plant false memories in the brain. And in a different context, one of the emerging areas that's really interesting in law neuroscience is pain detection. And once we understand the circuitries that cause pain, I guess the question is, could we then instill pain and use that in many coercive measures in the legal system as well? So
wow, that's amazing.
So even if they're innocent, we're going to find ways to implant memories of pain as deterrents, and she's like over the moon excited about this.
Well, did you notice who was in the background? There was a guy in a suit, slender guy in a suit, smoking a cigarette. Imagine, if you will, a world in which we can implant pain to Rod Serling. He was right there. I heard the Twilight Zone. I heard the Twilight Zone theme playing, Brian. It was playing in the background. I mean, what a whack job. Leave it to the WEF to come up with something completely insane. How many ways does this violate every human, moral norm that you can conceive of? It's pre-crime.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Pre-crime with pretty, I would consider that cruel and unusual punishment, to infiltrate somebody's brain and implant pain memories that are like, who knows what kind of damage you're going to do to somebody's psychosis or their psyche.
Exactly.
as you start toying around with these things, like, and the enthusiasm in which she's explaining this is just like, you couldn't craft a more devious villain if you tried.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can see Dr. Evil over there doing his thing too. It's like, oh my word, yeah. the thing that really boggles the mind is, who do they think is going to be trustworthy to have that kind of power?
Well, them, of course. Like,
Well,
come on, Dave.
them, of course, but
You're. Come on now. How could you not figure this out? Of
but
course, it's like when she's the one who can push the button, it's all good.
then it's all good. So the level of arrogance, the lack of introspection, the lack of understanding about the human condition and how absolute power corrupts. It's just staggering. It's just staggering. Of course,
It is.
and his people will still be there for us to mock for some time to come, I think.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing: these are not people who don't have access to power and
No, these are
influence.
moneyed people. These are people with lots of
Okay,
money, lots
these
of
people have
influence.
tremendous influence
Yes,
and power and money, and they were just dealt a pretty devastating blow with the Trump election.
absolutely.
Right. I do think that people do look to the United States still diminished, certainly, but I think they still do look to the United States as kind of the 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 beacon pointing to true north as far as like what what is a good target or what does success look like as it relates to human rights and
Sure.
the freedom of speech and people's ability to have domain over their own lives, things like
Right.
that. And that WEF cohort was just dealt a massive blow because had Trump not won, now we're talking about packing the Supreme Court. We're talking about the filibuster going away,
Right.
and it was they were not being quiet about gun rights going away and freedom of speech was under attack. I mean, before Elon Musk bought Twitter, freedom of
Right.
speech was kind of a historical notion. We
Quaint,
just we
quaint,
talk about
quaint
past tense a
concept.
lot.
Yes. Quaint concept.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was kind of the path we were heading down, and still may be, and there's still maybe things going on behind the scenes that I would never know about, but that was the path we were going down. And now we took it in, we took a very sharp 90-degree turn, and now we're kind of trending back, even though it's a short-term trend so far,
Right.
trending back towards quote unquote normalcy, where freedom of speech is absolute, where the Second Amendment is absolute in order to protect the First Amendment, if nothing
Right.
else. And these very powerful, very rich people with these kind of, psychopathic ideas, I would call them,
Yes. Exactly. I would too.
have been dealt a massive blow. So the obvious question is, it seems unlikely they're just kind of like, okay, well, that sucked. We were almost there. Next time we'll get it. That seems like an unlikely path.
Right.
What is the counter strike going to be? How could it go any other way, right?
Right. Well,
Or am
now
I being paranoid?
there's only, well, so again, let's jump back to FDR, his first election, and coming out of the Great Depression and programs that didn't work and all this stuff that happened back then, and the fact that ultimately World War II turned it all around. So depending on the time frame between where we're at right now and the time frame for the war, whatever the war is. I mean, it's going to be big. It's, maybe Biden's trying to start it now by letting Ukraine shoot missiles into Russia. I don't know, but depending on what the time frame is between where we're at now, it's not 100% unity, but the edges, the hard edges have softened. This is a good preparation for a move into greater unity if it's necessitated by an existential conflict.
Right.
So, if you look at these things through the historical lens and you think of it in these fourth turning, motifs that you and I talk about quite often, this is an easier place to get to some level of unity that can be called upon to resist an existential threat than we had 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So now it's
Right.
also,
but so my again, I'm trying not to be in tinfoil hat land or paranoia land or doomsday land. I'm trying to
right.
be pragmatic and like calling balls and strikes here, but it doesn't seem likely to me they're going to just take this laying down.
No, no,
It
no.
seems like they could see and feel victory within their grasp,
Right.
and they just got derailed. It also seems that the counter strike is going to have to be significant to overcome this setback. Is that so far all kind of tracking? Does that
Totally
make
agree.
sense?
Yeah,
Or am
totally
I
agree.
being
Totally
okay?
agree.
So it's not likely to be, um, although it could be, but I wouldn't think it's likely to be like F-22s being flown at my little town or your little town where you
Right.
live.
No.
Like it's not likely to be like that kind of a thing, but it will be an information war. It'll be a utilities war. There'll be some crisis that necessitates them stepping in and saving
Right.
the day. It's kind of how it seems like it would have to go.
Right.
Like they would have to be the better choice of the two that we would have. And what we have
Yeah.
right now is kind of this getting back to normalcy. So something significant enough for them to be the better choice
Yes.
has to be kind of the path we're going to go down, which means, again, I don't know that although the way Biden's making decisions, right, or whoever's calling the shots is making decisions in Russia and Ukraine, like we're certainly inching towards nuclear World War III, which is bizarre, and we'll cover that in a second. But
Yes.
I don't think I don't think that's plan A. Plan A
Yeah.
is probably going to be some kind of technological thing, an information thing, a giant, massive conspiracy. It's like a Hail Mary, I guess, would
Yeah.
kind of be the way it would have to be.
Right.
What do you think that looks like?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's for the current sort of softening of the edges and for the current sort of consent, well, not cons- for well, yeah, consensus for a lot of the current consensus on issues to go away, there would have to be some sort of domestic, I think, probably domestic, significant threat that would sort of derail all the rest of this. Maybe you could say some high level assassination of a leftist figure or something of that nature, that would break that down, would break down
Like
that
a false flag kind of a thing?
like a false flag incident. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that, that would be a possibility. And that's where a lot of it gets to timing, is if this goes too long, the ground will be not fertile enough for that to happen. If the current kind of state of things goes too long, and I don't know what too long is. I don't know if it's months or years. I don't know what it is. But if it goes too long, then it'll be really hard to make that happen. And so,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that smart people that have malevolent intentions are very well aware of that, and it would have to be some kind of Hail Mary thing. It would have to be.
I mean, it could be a stock market crash. It could be
Right.
the utility grid, the power grid going down, and water
Right.
supply. Like, or it could be things like that. So,
Yeah.
okay. So, last thing I want to ask you about, and you know about this stuff way more than I do. Biden is now a lame duck with no successor, and it's largely been rumored. I would say, probably more than rumor at this point, that he's not really the one calling the shots.
Right.
But we have a tenure at president that's coming to a close with no successor who has the same values and priorities and ideas of what we're trying to accomplish. Why is it now that they're approving U.S. missiles being flown into the heart of Russia? Why is it now they're approving these? What was it, like landmines or something like that?
Yeah.
Some kind of thing that Putin has openly said, like, here's my red line. Don't.
Right.
Which, by the way, he gave us a red line, like, don't bring Ukraine into NATO, and like, well, I'll leave him alone.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we say we're going to bring Ukraine into NATO like the next day or whatever.
Right.
Why would an outgoing president that's a lame duck president with no successor? Give me the best case scenario for why would they do this? So forget what you really think. Like, give me the best case scenario why you think it would happen.
Why I think it is happening.
Give me two things. First,
Okay.
I'll get to you why you really think it's happening in a minute. But first, give me the steel man argument for like what's the best case scenario for why we're doing this.
Well, the best case scenario is I'm apolitical and we need to help Zelensky win the war. And, this is the next step because they're on the verge of losing the war. So we have to do this. And I'm not even thinking, I forgot there was an even election. I'm not even thinking about Trump. I'm just doing the right thing. That's the best case scenario. The most from the left and from the Biden perspective. Okay. It's not
so the now on the plausibility scale, one being not very good and 100 being awesome. Like, where does that rank?
That's not why it's happening. That's not why it's happening. The reason it's happening, the actual reason I believe it's happening, I think it's undeniable, is everything that's happening in Washington, D.C. now among the elites is to Trump-proof the next 4 years. And the best way to Trump-proof the next 4 years is to get the Russia-Ukraine conflict hyped up, maybe get him to throw some missiles at, maybe get Putin to throw some missiles at Moldova or Poland or someplace like that derails the Trump idea of, yeah, I'll have the Ukraine thing solved in a day. So the best thing for the left is to derail the Trump agenda, which is, and so I think it's, to me, it's undeniable. That's why he's doing it, because he's trying to Trump proof the next, at least the next couple of years, of there being a unitary Republican government under Trump.
So we're gonna hand Trump to use the proper vernacular of where I grew up, a shit sandwich in Ukraine.
Yes.
Right. The stock market is, how it aligns with 1929 and other significant crashes in history. The parallels are there for that. So we're gonna hand him a shit sandwich with Ukraine. We're gonna hand him a stock market that is just waiting for this cycle's version of Barrett Stearns or whatever,
Right.
For it to all come crashing down. We've got all this unrest in schools, and now Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy and Trump and his team are going to go in and start dismantling things. So we're setting these landmines. So as they dismantle the deep state and the uniparty and the bureaucracy and things like that, simultaneously, really bad things are going to be happening, which would be indicative that Trump's doing the wrong things. This could be the counterstrike you and I were just talking about. Like, this could be how we make the WEF like folks look like the better alternative, because look, you got what you wanted, people. Trump came in and started dismantling things, and now look at Russia, Ukraine. Now look at the stock market. Now look at your 401k. Now look at the school system and all these things. It kind of all now again.
It does.
I don't know any of this stuff, but it all kind of fits, though, right?
Well, it does. And I'll tell you the reason I really think it fits. And that is because all they got to do is throw a monkey wrench in the thing for 2 years. 2 years, that's it. Because in 2 years, the Senate and the House could change. And
likely will. Historically speaking, they likely will.
Yeah, and historically speaking, because who's ever out of power tends to gain seats, and who's ever in power tends to lose seats. Trump is a lame duck president.
Something like 60 years since the president had the House and Senate and kept them through the midterms. It doesn't happen for sure.
It doesn't happen because the American people are by nature impatient and want more than they can get.
Greener.
That's just us.
That is what we can't have. Yep. For sure.
And Trump being a lame duck president, so all they got to do is hamstring him for 2 years, and then the last 2 years they can just tie him up and then put him into jail after he gets out, when Juan Merchan gets his sentencing hearing going.
Okay, so you and I agree that this all kind of fits. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it fits.
It does.
Now let's just take a beat and acknowledge how sinister that is. How many thousands of people will die across the globe for this to happen, for this to be a working plan, for this to be a success? Tens or hundreds of thousands of people are going to have to pay with their lives in order for this group of people to get what they want, if in fact this is kind of how it's going. I hope that we as a people, not just the United States, but across the globe, can kind of see through that and figure out who the villain is. But based on the last 5 years, I'm not confident.
Well, and it's the other part of that is, even if it goes to plan, then yes, thousands and tens of thousands of people could die. But if there's a slight miscalculation when you're talking about nuclear powers, then it could easily spiral out of control. And the smart people that plan that, we're just going to hamstring them for a while. Yeah, we'll have a few casualties, but it's not going to be that bad. That could really turn into a major. That could turn into a war, into a big war.
Well, but the don't forget though, Dave, the government. How the government does anything is how they do everything, and they're really good at most things. So the chance of them having miscalculations infinitesimally small.
Yeah, only about 95%. Yeah, something like that. Crazy.
So it's a weird time where there's this optimism, there's this kind of vacuum of chaos. There's some holdouts for sure, like we mentioned in the New York Times and the Sunny Holstons of the world and the View, and there's some holdouts for sure of people who are hanging on to religion. But by and large, we're in this eerily calm time where there's kind of a vacuum of chaos,
right?
And these big things are being put into motion that have really serious like this thing in Ukraine just makes no sense to me, other than
Yeah.
you just want to hand the guy a mess. Like there,
Yeah.
and the people who have to die in order for that to happen, like, well, you gotta break a few eggs, make an omelet once in a while. Like that we're back to the same crap that we saved from the beginning, which is absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
Nero didn't want to hear what his advisor had to say about why you shouldn't torture people, probably.
and you see, I think, Brian, one of the most important things, and as we point out to Kenny G in the future, what's happening in our time is there never comes a time when you're going to win any election, you're going to win a war, you're going to win the peace, and that's going to be long lasting. I mean, it sounds like a pretty I have a very positive view of the future, punctuated by a number of very negative events. So, this is so. Anybody who's excited now, great, be excited, but recognize that human nature hasn't changed, and the path of humanity towards these great existential crises, they doesn't change. It's going to happen, and we have to remember that so that we're prepared for that. So because just like the Harris supporters who were like, we're going to win, there's no doubt, and then they're crushed when it's over. Well, okay, so now there's a new group of people that are excited, and look at this, it's going to be a new utopia, and happy days are here again, and all that.
Yeah.
It's going to come to an end, and you got to be prepared, and you got to be, you got to think through these things and not let your emotions carry you away, because that's how you get taken advantage of.
I agree with you 100%. There again, as I said in the very beginning of today's episode, it's almost too much gleeful exuberance. Like it's almost perfect for a major this setback, right?
It is.
The only thing that gives me hope, and ironically, that the things that we will do over the next 2 to 5 years, or 2 to 7 years, or whatever, are the things that Kenny G's generation will look back and go, these are the things that created problems for us. But right now, I do have more confidence that we have people coming in, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, who are very capable, competent, smart people.
Yes.
And it's never going to be perfect. It's gonna be ruined over the next 100 years. But I am excited that they're going to come in and fix some stuff. I really am. I really do think that they can do some meaningful, beneficial change, and simultaneously things are going to get gnarly along the way.
Exactly. That's the circumspect view, and that's the right way, I think, to approach. That's the right way to approach victory. That's the right way to approach defeat. The circumspect view, the long view, and approach it. This can change. If it's good, it can change. If it's bad, it can change. And be prepared for either.
Yeah. All right. Well, as Dave mentioned in the opening, if you've heard this and made it this far and you think we're completely nuts, we'd love to hear your input. Or if you think we're right, we'd love to hear that too. Again, we're trying to explain to future generations what this moment in time is like, as they will undoubtedly look back and wonder, what the hell were these people thinking? And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to tell them exactly what we were thinking. So let us know where we got it right, where we got it wrong. You can do that at unsilentpodcast.com. You can go to our Rumble channel. There's a great comment section there. And until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.